So yeah, I'm DJ Rahming. I work at AWS. I'm a senior solutions architect. I work on a team called Visual Compute that's meant to help visual effects, animation, high-end commercial post folks navigate the wonderful world of AWS. And Guillaume?
Hi, my name is Guillaume Brossard. I'm a director of engineering at Autodesk, in charge of everything around flow production tracking, including RV and OpenRV. I'm also a member of the Open Review Initiative, ASWF TSC.
So what we're here to talk about today is OpenRV in the cloud, but it's a little bit more than that. The idea here is we kind of have a bit of a success story of how open source can kind of help large commercial customer entities work together to really quickly prototype things, really quickly kind of collaborate across the different companies. And so in order to get to the kind of meat of the story, which is, yes, RV running in the cloud and actually having some decent streaming options, we've kind of got to go back a little bit and give a little bit of context. The first thing I want to talk about is something called AWS CDI, or Cloud Digital Interface. So at AWS, one of the challenges we had, and in 2020, the kind of broadcast team worked pretty hard to come up with a solution for, was how do we effectively get video from one place to another inside the cloud? So how can we have instance-to-instance communication of uncompressed video at really, high bandwidth and low latency? And so, as far as marketing is concerned, I think my buddy Mike Owen likes to say, we didn't really spend that much time on it. We said, it's kind of an analog of an SDI cable, but for the cloud. So like you could just plug in an SDI cable on one side and an SDI cable on the other. We'll just call it CDI and we'll continue to do that. And so this itself is an open source project. Admittedly, it only runs on AWS today, but the idea is to actually try to leverage the topology of cloud networks to provide really, really high bandwidth, low latency transports in between instances on the cloud. And so that's AWS CDI as a project. It does 4K, 60 FPS at lower latency than a frame in between instances on the cloud. And so that's kind of the goal. So that was the first thing, is we have this thing called AWS CDI. It allows us to get video from one instance on the cloud, one machine that's running on the cloud, to another instance. Similar, and again, analogous to an SDI cable running in the cloud. And so, on the broadcast side, there's a lot of workflows that works for, and there's a lot of things that make sense. Now, for us, when we were talking to, again, visual effects places, animation places, high-end commercial post places, one of the places where this first kind of came up as a requirement is places doing finishing. So, if they're working on, working with Flame or working with the base light, and they've got a reference video signal that they want to get back to ground, the kind of conventional 8-bit options that were there weren't really good enough. And so we worked very closely with Autodesk and Filmlight to do bespoke integrations of CDI directly inside those applications. And so at NAB 2022, I believe, we showed Baselight running with CDI baked inside it, and actually providing a JPEG XS visually lossless stream to ground. And then by IBC 2022, we actually had it running in Flame as well. And so again, that was a bespoke integration directly inside Flame, and we worked with partners to provide more compressed options, things that might be a little bit more appropriate for a finishing session that was running in Flame rather than kind of maybe a DI session that was running in a Baselight. And so that led us to kind of an ecosystem here where we started to plug into the backbone of CDI in AWS for workflows that made sense for us. And so the first example I'm showing here, you're going to see two really dense AWS architectural diagrams. I'm not going to apologize for them. We've got to always do the AWS diagrams. But this one shows what we had wired up for IBC 2022. And so we had a Flame running in the London data center, London region for AWS. And obviously IBC is in Amsterdam. And so we had a UHD LG monitor running an HDR signal, 10-bit signal, coming down to ground from that Flame that was running in the London data center. And we were getting about 2 or 3 frames of latency and still a reference quality signal coming to ground. Now again, that was with a commercial partner, Streambox. We're going to show another commercial partner a little bit later on. But the idea is once you get into the ecosystem of CDI, there's a whole bunch of new options that start to open up. And we started thinking, okay, well, this makes sense for these very specific integrations that we're doing one-on-one, but if we move forward, how do we grow that? How do we get that into a place where maybe it touches a lot more different workflows and solves a lot more problems for the kind of space that we're in visual effects and animation? And so we kind of started looking at, we think maybe remote reviews might be served by this, if we've got the ability to actually have things running in the cloud that can easily make it to ground in a way that it has high fidelity and relatively low latency. One of the big challenges we've seen over the last few years is the kind of concept of a hybrid theater review doesn't really hold up. Some bits work, some bits don't. Can we make that better? Can we improve on that workflow? And then maybe longer term is if we've got these really high fidelity signals kind of running through the cloud in different places and plugging into that larger kind of pipeline of CDI tools, maybe even for video conferencing, the ability to actually have better than 8-bit video or better than whatever signal you've got coming in for those video conferencing workflows. And so when I was thinking about all of this, I was thinking one of the big touch points there would probably be an application like OpenRV, and so, or RV in general. And so I reached out to Guillaume, and I think that's where you kind of picked up here.
Yeah, so DJ reached out, and he mentioned earlier that they were trying to a little bit grow the ecosystem for CDI. It turns out that when Autodesk made the decision to open source RV, growing the RV ecosystem was also one of their main objectives. By open sourcing RV and putting it in the hands of the Academy Software Foundation community, we were hoping to accelerate the development by engaging with developers and studios and vendors that are part of the larger Academy Software Foundation community. And since the release, the community really continuously grew. The number of contributions to OpenRV has been increasing, and those contributions are actually taking multiple forms. Yes, pull requests to the code, but also engagement with the community, with vendors, through either the OpenRV TSC or other occasion like today where we just talk with people and we engage on the things that will actually help them grow the adoption of OpenRV in their studio. Contributions have been coming from both studios and individual contributor in different forms. Updates to existing components, supports to additional flavor of Linux distribution, optimization or fixes to existing features. But what is really exciting is then when we're seeing contribution coming from the community that we didn't really expect foresee coming. So after my OpenRV open source talk last year, DJ reached out to have a conversation about CDI. He wanted to know if we were considering to integrate CDI into OpenRV. At that time, we had other things in plan for our roadmap. We were really working into refactoring the commercial version of RV to be built around that OpenRV core we just released. But also we wanted to, before getting into more video output support for OpenRV, develop a video output plugin API that will allow vendors and contributors to develop their own plugins for OpenRV. So it was a little bit too early for us, but we wanted to develop that video plugin output API. We knew we wanted to add the support for Edja and Blackmagic, and then after maybe consider CDI. So I had a small fight with DJ. Like DJ was like, "Oh, you guys, you should do CDI first," and and I was like, "No, it should be AWS that actually made a contribution." So we had a couple of meetings. We didn't get anywhere at the beginning, but then DJ came back and he said, "Maybe I have that project where we could actually integrate CDI through Edja at no cost or no work for you guys." And this is where that idea of the project come in, and DJ is going to continue and explain a little bit what it is.
Yeah, I don't think it was that much of a fight. I think it was a nice, healthy discussion.
It was a fight.
But yeah, so like that first, that highlighted blue point right there, which is CDI integration through AJA, is really, kind of what I promised at the beginning. That's the kind of skunkworks project that we wanted to try and turn around really quickly. And so what we did is for NAB this year, so in April in 2024, just a few weeks before, we had some folks from AJA, we had some folks from AWS, we had some folks from Autodesk, and we said, hey, can we quickly come up with something where we can kind of use the fact that you guys are already working on supporting the AJA SDK in OpenRV, and we knew that the AJA folks were working on a plugin system for the AJA SDK to be able to load up dynamically specified plugins, to build a plugin that talks CDI, That's how similar they are. And so to talk CDI and use that very quickly. So I think that it was a matter of, with the two teams together, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, we kind of got together and we started building it. So again, AWS provides automatically already the kind of CDI layer, and that also includes the workstation that runs on, the networks where the communication goes across. So all of the kind of cloud stuff that CDI needs comes from the AWS side. And then on the Autodesk side, that's where Guillaume's team came in, OpenRV, with the addition of what is now part of the project itself, with the AVIO layer and the support for the AJ SDK. But we had an early version where we were able to kind of quickly create a private branch, share that with the AJ folks, and they were able to update their SDK for the new plugin support, and then plug in that last little bit, which was the plugin for CDI. And so if we look at this graph right here, one of the reasons why we think it went so quickly and the collaboration was kind of so seamless, even though it's across 3 relatively large commercial companies, is all those orange boxes are open source. And so that gave us the ability to really, really quickly, even though at the core of it, that gray box will eventually at some point become a commercial offering. Right now it's just a very early technology prototype that we put together in a couple of weeks. But really the idea there was to say, okay, if we put this together and we put this in people's hands and they look at it and we talk about all the different workflows this might unlock, what does this mean? How should we implement this? And it's the kind of thing that we couldn't really do as a large commercial kind of endeavor where we'd say, let's invest all of this energy into this product where we're not really sure what it looks like yet. And so that was one of the really kind of, big benefits for this project for us, is that quick turnaround time and that really seamless collaboration across the 3 companies. And so in the end, what that looks like, I said I'd get another AWS diagram up there, and here it is it gives the ability for OpenRV, without natively supporting CDI, just because they've already support for the open source AJ SDK, we can plug in that commercial CDI plugin for the SDK for AJA, and then have access to that whole backbone for CDI. Again, this is a very noisy diagram, but the idea here is to think, what are all of the different places where it might be useful? So yes, we might want to light up a theater directly with something like a JPEG XS stream that's visually lossless. We might want to send a signal that is a high quality signal to a supervisor's home where they've already got a very good setup that they've set up over the last 4 years. We might want to send it to someone that is mobile and doesn't have the ability to actually sit down and go, but there's a good calibrated device in an iPad Pro or something like that, and send out the signal there. And then again, kind of what I said, what I think is probably a novel use case, something we haven't seen a whole lot of, but maybe that also becomes a stream that comes into video conferencing. And so that was the whole idea, and so we were able to do that, and that is something that we showed at NAB 2024. And now I think I'm going to do kind of what is the ill-advised thing of just trying to do a live demo of a bleeding edge technology demo and see if this works. You're clapping now, it might not work. And so let's see here. If I come here, I'm going to open up a Linux workstation that's running RV, that has RV installed. In this, I'm going to open up a Windows station that's running a Colorfront encoder. So this is a separate cloud workstation that has an application that's actually used just to take that CDI signal and encode it for the ground. And so let me just log in.
Anything you had to do, DJ, to run OpenRV in the cloud, or?
Actually, we had started doing tests early on last year for OpenRV and building versions of OpenRV on EC2 instances in AWS. And for this prototype, there was nothing specific that we had to do for OpenRV to run on the cloud. We did have to get a build from Bernard on your team that just had the early version of the AJ SDK installed. So, but nothing specific had to happen for RV specifically.
So you had to have a special build of Bernard for the AJA, but actually we officially released last week the AJA integration in OpenRV. So if you go and get the latest build, the video output plugin API is there, the AJA build is ready, there's Blackmagic support too that's been added, as well as NDI support.
And so I think for a lot of people in the room, we'll see a very familiar RV UI. And if I go into the preferences here, actually I'm just going to load up some footage quickly as well. But if I go into the preferences, what we'll see here is, again, this is a virtual workstation that's running on AWS, but because of the virtual KONA that we plugin that we had, we can see here that we've got a KONA device that is what's showing up. And that KONA device, if we look down at the rasters, is speaking CDI. And so what we're doing is we're actually sending a UHD signal at 10-bit from one virtual machine in the cloud to another. And so once I go ahead and say, let's go ahead and switch to presentation mode, if everything works out, we can see here now the second machine has already gotten that video signal through CDI. And if I come back to my local machine, and give it a second, maybe I might just need to launch this, but I just want to kind of clarify here again what's going on is this machine is one virtual machine that's running on AWS, that's running RV, and then this is another one that's taking that CDI signal that's uncompressed, really low latency, coming in and then re-encoding it. In this case, it's using an application called Colorfront streaming server, and then that comes down to ground here, and then we were able to see on my laptop the, I've converted it to HD just because the UHD signal wasn't working great with the Wi-Fi that's in the room because it was a fairly large kind of bandwidth need, but that's an HD signal that's coming down. And so if I go ahead and I click play, we'll see here the latency between the top box there where you see RV and then the kind of bottom box in the bottom left where the encoder is getting the signal in is pretty high. That should really be less than a frame once we actually get an optimized release version of that plugin. Right now, it's just because it's a technology demo, we've got fairly high latency. But now we can actually see what the stream would look like for someone sitting at home. Again, this signal that you're seeing down here is an HD signal that's coming to ground from an RV that's actually running in Oregon around 1,000 miles away. Someone told me is how far that is. I don't know US geography that well. But yeah, so that's it. That's the demo. And if you've got any more questions for us, we're also talking about this at the Autodesk booth as well. So feel free to pass by Tuesday afternoon. Both Guillaume and I will be there, and we can talk about any of the details.
We do have time for like maybe one question, if there's any.
Go ahead.
You mentioned it only works on AWS today, so the obvious question is when will you support other CSPs?
Well, you know, that's a difficult question because the whole point of AWS CDI is to take advantage of the way that cloud networks are built. And so the source for that is open source and available to any cloud provider, just no other cloud provider has seen any interest in implementing it. So I think that would be a question for other cloud providers to see if they want to take advantage of it as well.
Makes sense, thanks.
Yeah.
Any others?
I have one maybe for DJ. Any next step on the?
Yeah, so the whole point of this prototype was really to start discussions, and at NAB we had a lot of interesting discussions about different workflows that people might want to use, that kind of virtual KONA. So the idea of, you know, we've seen AJA cards, KONA cards in physical places everywhere, and so all of those touch points, where would it make sense? Which workflows do you see migrating to the cloud, where you'd want to have the similar functionality? And so we're still really open to that, and if anything, any light bulbs come on that we didn't talk about already in this presentation, please reach out to us. And we got a lot of feedback at NAB that was super valuable for us and also for AJA.
Great, thank you.